The second theory we know alongside multi-store model is the levels of processing theory, by Craig and Lockhart, 1972. So I'm just going to go through this fairly quickly. Remember, one of the problems with multi-store model is that it overemphasizes the role of rehearsal. It says the way that we remember things in short-term memory and the way we pass things into long-term memory is through rehearsal. Whereas critics, and we all know that simply repeating something and going over it again and again and again isn't the best way to pass things into your long-term memory, or isn't the best way to remember things in general. For that, we've got the levels of processing theory. So, levels of processing says that we have a limited amount of processing power. There's only so much information we can actually hold. But more importantly, it says that memory is a byproduct of that processing. So, you don't have to try and remember things. You shouldn't have to try and memorize things. Memory is not a separate process to understanding. If you process information, if you understand it, you will remember it better than if you don't process it, or don't understand it. If we give you just a random string of words that make no sense, you will remember them much less than if we give you words that make sense in a certain order. By doing it differently, by understanding the information, you remember it much more easily. So levels of processing says that memory is a byproduct of our processing, or a byproduct of our understanding, and the better we process things, the better we understand it, the better we will remember. So rehearsal creates what we call a memory trace, but there's different levels of this memory trace. So memory trace can be the kind of strong or weak and so on. If we use deeper analysis, if we use deeper processing, a deeper understanding, then we produce a better memory trace. It means that we will be able to remember it much more clearly for a much longer period of time, things like that. So there's two types of processing. Type 1 is pure maintenance rehearsal. This is where we hold something for a short period of time, usually because we have just rehearsed it or learned it in one style. We're trying to remember it in the same way it was given to us. Versus Type 2 processing. Type 2 processing is deeper or more elaborative rehearsal. So we practice something in a different way, or we think about it more, or we do things like we link it to personal context in our lives. This creates a deeper level of understanding, which means we remember it better. So depth comes from a couple of things. One, your familiarity. So by the end of AS year, you should be able to look at other psychology studies you haven't learned and learn them much more easily than you did at the start of the year. Because you're familiar with how these sort of studies are done, you should remember them better. The amount of time you have to process it, and how it fits with our existing structures. So remember various things like personal relevance. If we can make an analogy and link it to your personal life, you'll remember it better. If we can elaborate on something and expand on it, explain it more, if you use more effort, if it's harder to do and you spend a lot of kind of effort trying to figure it out, once you do figure it out, you remember it better. And distinctiveness, how unique or individual it is. This is, remember, how levels of processing can, in some ways, explain flashbulb memories. Those distinct, clear events from our lives that we just remember without trying. Hyde and Jenkins studied this. They asked people to copy out words, cross out vowels, or think about the meaning of words on a list of words. And participants remembered 4 times as many words when they had to think about the meaning. That's because that's a deeper analysis than the other two. Another study they did was they had people reading through lists of words and thinking about how much they enjoyed the meaning, or thinking about the meaning of the words. And those two conditions, one group knew that they were going to have a memory test, whereas the other group didn't. And what they found was, since they were both processing at the same level, it didn't matter whether they knew they had a test or not, they did exactly the same level of recall. So remember, we've got 3 levels. Shallow processing, or the shallow level, which provides structural information usually. So you might just focus on, like in the Craig and Tulding experiment, how does it look like? Is it in bold or is it in capital letters? The next level is the intermediate level, where you process it either phonetically or phonemically. You focus on how the word sounds. For example, does it rhyme? And finally, deep processing, which is semantic, where we focus on things at a deeper level, a better understanding. What does that word mean? So does it fit into this particular sentence? If we understand it, we remember it better. So we've got 3 levels: shallow, intermediate and deep. And the further down we go, the deeper the level we do it at, the better we remember. And that's the theory in a quick summary. Thanks for listening.